Well, hey there, everybody. It's Todd Randy, and this is my recording of the beginning of my testimony. It's pretty in depth, and I'm going to break this up in probably 2 or 3 videos because it's a lot to download. And before I begin, as I mentioned in my introduction, I've never been one to try to muscle my way through an argument metaphorically or try to win a debate, because the minute you start to do that, you're basically slamming the door in somebody's face. My goal in this little ministry that I've had and sharing my testimony with Pastor Tim on his channel and teaching on homosexuality and sexual sin, not just homosexuality, for the last 15 years. I've developed a lot of knowledge on the subject, not only because I lived it for 15, almost 16 years, but also just talking to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people like yourself about the struggles. Maybe it's a family member, it could be a good friend, a coworker, somebody at your church that you don't know, maybe. It's very difficult. This is a very controversial issue, especially in today's world. Back when I was younger, there was no internet. There was no Dr. Phil or Oprah, thank you, Lord. But there was no way to really research it a lot except for maybe a book or a magazine. And that was always, one-sided. So there wasn't a lot of research available when I first came out of the closet, so to speak, and started living the life. So basically, I was born and raised in a middle to upper class family. My dad was working for a very successful company. And of course, as he developed his skills and grew in that company, he then had to transfer, which that was a lot of fun. Anyway, so I have 2 sisters. Both of them are older than I am. I am the boy, only boy, and I am the baby. So you can imagine what that was like. So, and then being gay on top of that. That was just like putting it all in a blender and hitting the highest button you can. So when I was 5 years old, believe it or not, when I was 5 years old, I had these strange feelings for the neighbor boy. His name was David, and we lived in a town in Oregon at that point, and I just had an infatuation for him. Maybe it was attention, because when you're 5, there's no sexual part there, especially in those days. We didn't have access again to the internet and things that the kids do today, which is horrible. But he and I always just played together, and I just always was drawn to him. Maybe I was really looking for a friendship. There's a difference between intimacy and sexuality. Intimacy is what we're having today. It's maybe what you have with your best friend. That's with Jesus, is intimacy, that connection. Sexuality is not who we are. It's a part of who we are. Yes, there's male and female, but my identification isn't based on my sex with my wife. It's based on my relationship with people, including my wife, and the other part is something that she and I share together that was ordained by God, something he created. And I, of course, years ago, didn't believe any of that, let alone God. I was an atheist and hated him and hated people that were Christian. But I'll get there. Here it comes. It'll be down the road here in a little bit. So we moved around a lot then for my dad to grow in his career. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She was always in the PTAs and the JCs, and she was on a bowling team and very well known. My parents were kind of considered the Barbie and Ken of their era. Both very sweet people in the public. My dad would open the door for a stranger any day, but not necessarily open it for his family, unless there are people watching. I was not beaten. I was not abused physically. I was neglected, but that's a different issue altogether. My mother was my warrior, I guess you could say. She was everything to me. I was born without natural immunities in my body, so I was pretty sick as a child. And at 2, I had my tonsils out. So I had very high fevers, and back in those days, penicillin was really the only antidote to help. And alcohol baths. They used to give me alcohol baths when I was a little baby. Of course, I don't remember any of that, but so I was a pretty sick child. So through my first, second, third, fourth grade, I really couldn't go out and play with all the other kids like a lot of people can. A lot of other boys could, because my mom was afraid I'd get sick. So I stayed inside a lot. My sisters were very active with horses and were gone a lot, went to horse shows. My oldest sister's 9 years older than I am, so she would take my middle sister, or Dad would drop them off, and then he'd go do something and come back. So again, transferring up and down the freeway in Oregon, we would land in some spot for 5 years maybe, and off we'd go again. That was very difficult because girls somehow, especially back in the late 70s, girls somehow can get by a lot better. Boys have to prove themselves. And I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself then. I walked with my head down. I did not want to be in any sport. I felt insecure around boys. Obviously, I didn't have a father figure, so I didn't know what that meant to be a boy. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't wearing little tutus and running around the house pretending to be a girl. I played with my Tonka toy trucks and play in the mud and all those things that a normal, I hate to use the word normal, but a child of my age would do. But I also didn't know how to relate to boys in school, how to hang out, be cool, I guess, because I did not have a warrior. My dad, I idolized him, if you will. Again, we were not raised in a Christian family. My mother, I hate to say this, she was a closeted Christian. Shh, don't tell anybody. No, she kept it to herself. A very lovely woman. She's gone now, but very lovely woman. So my dad, then I don't believe he was anything at that point. And we didn't go to church. We didn't do anything that had to do with Jesus, except for on Christmas and Easter, we'd kind of mention his name, but there wasn't a relationship there. So the house was basically spiritually empty. There's no Holy Spirit indwelling in our home. We weren't into porn. Obviously, back then, there was no way to access that except for going to 7-Eleven and buying a magazine. And, 6 years old, it's kind of hard to do. So anyway, by the time I was 13 then, I knew that I was attracted to boys. I won't even use the word gay because at that point, I didn't even know what that word was other than happy. So I was attracted to boys. So what happens is, and this is my point of view, this is what I've experienced. Again, I'm not a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a counselor. I have counseled, but I'm not licensed. So this is just my heart and what I'm sharing with you. So when I turned 13-ish and the hormones kicked in, and that's when generally a boy then doesn't go bleh to girls, and he's like, oh yeah, right around that age group. Well, that wasn't happening with me. The girls were still my buddies, if you will, and they love to hang around me, go figure, and because I'm extremely relational, so they love to do that, and the boys would be standoffish. I'm tall, so they would try to challenge me. I was pretty heavy set in high school and junior high and grade school, pretty chubby, and of course I was made fun of, names I won't even bring up here on the phone, so all of those behavioral things around me that how I would be treated was awful. So I'd always rely on my mom for strength because my dad wasn't there. When I was in 5th grade, my dad desperately wanted me to be into football because he was in college. He was a football player in high school. That's where my parents met. My mom was a cheerleader. My dad was a football player. Kind of the old story back in the 50s where that was very common, that the cheerleader and the football player would connect and get married. So that's the story of my family, my mom and dad. But anyway, so he wanted me to play football so bad, and I had no desire. I mean, I didn't want to go play in the kitchen, but I didn't have any desire to play football. And the main reason was, one, I didn't know how to relate to the guys, and two, I was always made fun of. People would call me fat and lots of F words, and it made me very uncomfortable. So, but I wanted to please him, because that's a boy's desire, is to please his dad. Even an abusive dad, the child, like a dog, always wants to please its owner. No, boys are not dogs. But I wanted to please him. So, of course, I said, okay, Dad, I'll try it. So one evening, we went out and played football in the backyard. Well, let me tell you how that was. Blah. So he taught me how to hold the football in my hand. Okay, so I got the football. And of course, when I flung it, it was like this big, messy, sissy, blah, and the ball bounced off someplace else. And, you know, my dad just stood there and he was like, I just saw the look on his face like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Well, that was the only time I ever picked up a ball and played with him. And I was in 5th grade. So I went to practice the next day. I even have a picture of me wearing my uniform. My mom came down and took a picture. Was my dad there? No. So I went to practice and, of course, made fun of, called Twinkle Toes was probably the nicest word I was called. And just felt so betrayed. No intimacy, no connection, abused, basically emotionally abused. And I didn't know how to fight back or stand up for myself. And I don't mean physically fight back, but just stand up for myself because I was never taught those skills. And so the more insecure I became, the stronger the picking on would grow from the boys especially. And so I got home that night and Dad came home late. And I said, Dad, I just can't do it. I just don't fit in. And I'll never forget it. He looked at me and he said, well, that's it. And that's all he said. He didn't then treat me bad the rest of the night, but basically I felt like at that point I was cut off from a relationship with him, that he, you know, threw the ball one time and that was the bond. And if I quit football, then there was no adoration for his son. You know, it was like, that was it. So we moved then again right after that. And by the time I was in high school, you can imagine that those hormones were pretty strong. Of course, shoving them down inside, had girlfriends in high school, trying to be, again, normal, and, you know, pretended. And we lived out in the country because we had horses. So that was a blessing, looking back now, because if I was in the city, I would have probably done things I shouldn't have. But it kept me away from those activities. And so right the day that I graduated, the next day, we were transferred from one part of Oregon to another. So there was no time, and I was just turned 18, so I didn't have a job or, you know. So my sister and I moved with my parents. We moved to Central Washington, and lived there for 6 years. We went from, you know, a climate that was, you know, maybe it might snow every 17 years to 3 feet of snow the first year we were there. And that was a good learning curve. So by the time I was 22, my parents were divorcing. My dad was cheating on my mom again. This is a continual thing that she tolerated. She loved him desperately until the day she died. She loved him deeply, but she just didn't want to be with him. So I knew the strength and the power I had in me to have not only the intimacy, but have the sexual connection with another guy was so strong. I could not stop thinking about it. And I had nobody to talk to, not a soul. I lied to everybody. So I decided I'd move to Portland, Oregon from there and try to start my life. And when I moved there, I got a job. I became very good at what I was doing. I worked in an accounting department, and I had two choices. I was either going to take my life or I was going to come out. And I really struggled with that. And I actually bought the pills to do so, to end my life. Thank you, Lord. I didn't, because I would have gone to hell because I didn't know who the Lord was. So I came out to my oldest sister first. Funny story. She then said, well, how about if I hire you a lady of the evening, if you will, and you can have some intimacy with her, so to speak, trying to keep this rated G, and then just see what you think, because maybe you're just confused. And I said, okay, I'll do that. Then you get to have your turn with her because maybe you're confused. Well, that quickly made her quiet. So she kind of realized, okay, there's no hope in this. So anyway, that was kind of the first person I came out to, scared to death, cried, bawled. I was a big sissy mare on her back patio, just sobbing, and you know, I was a mess. Anyway, But that first one is the most difficult. So for those of you that know somebody that struggles with homosexuality, that first initial, I'm gay, or love men, or whatever, that's very, very difficult. So I came out to the rest of my family. And then not too long after that, at Portland State, I met this guy, and after dating him for a while, and I was a virgin. I had never been with anybody in my life. We got together and we spent 9 years of you know what, in battle. The battle was he was going to be the leader, and I was basically his servant. And he put me down and told me that I was worthless, and every name under the sun, the S-U-N, to make himself feel better, because he also was struggling with his identity. So I felt like I deserved it. I left him 6 times. He drank like a fish. I started drinking to numb myself. I wanted so badly to keep one relationship. I didn't want to go bar hopping. I didn't want to be, the pictures that you see on TV of the drag queens and the gay pride parade. I didn't want that part. It wasn't that I was putting them down. I just didn't want to do that. I was more kind of a home buddy with a pot roast in the oven and mowing the yard and a white picket fence. That was kind of how I wanted to live my life. And finally, there was a day my partner became very abusive, or physically came after me. And I am a 2nd-degree brown belt in karate. And he had a knife, and next thing I knew, the knife is sticking in the floor, and he's knocked out beside it. I responded so quickly, and ironically, he called the police. So they came, and of course, nobody was arrested, and because there was alcohol involved, and I was actually sober, but thank goodness. So that was it for me. I was done with that. So I left him. It took a while, but I left him. I started a new life on my own, got into telecommunications, and became, I hate to use the word very successful, but worldly, being unsaved, very successful, made good money, was able to support myself, buy a house, buy a car, and so in that, then I seriously decided to end my life as well. I was hurting beyond words. I failed like my parents failed. And so at that point, I bought pills again, and I took them, and I called my mom and my sister that lived in my same town and said, I'm ending my life. I don't want to do this anymore. So they called 911. The next thing I knew, there were paramedics there, and they took me off to a triage hospital. I remember waking up the next day on a gurney with my sweats on that I was wearing, curled in a fetal position and not knowing what happened. They had pumped my stomach, and it was probably not a pretty sight. But I learned my lesson then, that life was more important than a person. And again, I didn't have Jesus then. So went through a couple more relationships. And then in 2000, my sister got saved. And my oldest sister, Debbie, she got saved. And she started witnessing to me in a different way than I'd ever heard from Christians before. You see, Christians before were calling me horrible names, telling me that I was an abomination, telling me that God hated me, that there was no hope for me. And that's all I ever heard from a Christian. The ones that knew that I was gay and knew that I lived that lifestyle. Now, tell me something. Why on earth would you want to serve a God that would hate you? I didn't. So I just made sure that I didn't believe in that. I told people, you believe whatever you want, but I believe it's about being a good person. That was my cliche. I'm a good person. No. But anyway, I thought I was. So I was miserable. So I got into another relationship because, that was going to fix it. And then that failed, and found out he was cheating on me, and it was drama. Anyways, so I booted his little tushy out of the house, and tried one more time, and that didn't work either, and booted him out. So my sister was seeing all this dysfunction in my life. I was drinking like a fish. I just was pouring it down to numb myself. And pretty young. I'm still pretty young when I was doing this. And so my sister said, you need peace, Todd. And there's only one that can give you peace, and that's Jesus. He's the only one. And for 2 years, she tried. And I'd hang up on her. I'd call her names. I didn't want to hear it. I was single and wasn't out and about, if you will. I was home alone every night when I get home from work and drink. Feel sorry for myself. And then one day I went on a camping trip with my parents and my sister. And it was my mom and my stepdad, my sister and her husband, and myself. Went on a camping trip. And she turned on a cassette, that really ages me, and wanted me to hear a pastor teach on, now bear with me here, the book of Revelation, which I would highly recommend you don't teach that to somebody that doesn't know the Lord. But, too hard to understand. So she let me listen to this. And, I was kind of enthralled. It was my time. I was kind of enthralled. I was drawn to listen. I wasn't fighting it for the first time. And so I sat there and I listened. And this is what the pastor said. He said, we have to remember that God did not create sin. He didn't create it. He allows it. He gives us free will. He gave Lucifer free will. Now, people always say, why would a loving God? Well, he's so loving. Not only did he give us his son, but he gave us the free will to choose. Otherwise, we'd just be puppets on a string. So I heard that. And then he said, you have to remember, too, that God didn't create people that are disabled. That wasn't part of his creation. Not that that's a sin, but because we're born into sin, we're broken. He didn't create those things. When he created Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, he said it is good, meaning, good. And of course, then they chose to do their own thing, try to become their own God through Satan's influence, and here we are. So I listened, and then he said, children that are born blind, people that are dying of cancer, homosexuality, those things weren't created by God. They're allowed because of the fall. And there's hope. That was the first time I ever heard something different that resonated in me. That I finally thought to myself, so I wasn't born gay, or God didn't create me gay and then was going to send me to hell because of it. That's a big step. And that's something I teach on for 15 years now. That's something you really have to pull apart and say, okay, why would God create you to be a certain way, a murderer, let's say, and then send you to hell? You've never repented, you never asked Christ in your life, because God didn't make that person murder somebody. That person had a free will. Did the desires for men grow in me and I felt like that was my lifestyle? Sure, absolutely. I'm not denying that. Did it feel like love to me? It did. It felt like natural to me to be in love with or think I was in love with a guy. Everything felt natural. It wasn't like I felt like I was swimming upstream. The idea of being with a woman did. It made me feel unnatural. So when I heard all this stuff, it just, like somebody hit me upside the head with a ton of bricks, which I needed, is when I finally decided, okay, maybe Lord, you are for real. So I didn't just, buy into it hook, line, and sinker. I definitely accepted Christ and said, Jesus, I'm sorry. I repent, which we've heard, metanoia, or I turn a different direction now, and I will try to trust in you to lead me. And here's the one thing he said. Now, I'm out in the middle of a forest in Oregon. And he said to me, in my head, I heard his voice. He said to me, son, follow me. He did not say, you stop being gay. You knock it off. What did he say to the lady that at the well? What did he say to Mary Magdalene? He didn't approach people with this abrasive anger, except for when they were destroying the synagogue. He did that, but he was not that way. He approached people with grace compassion, hope, and love. So I listened to him and I said, okay, Lord, I'll follow you. So for the next 2 years, that's exactly what I did. He didn't deliver me from any desires. I just decided to follow him. And then one day, I was coming out of the grocery store. Kid you not. I had a grocery bag in my hand, and I'm walking to my car. And this beautiful blonde walked by me. And I turned back and I looked at her tushy and thought, oh my goodness, she's beautiful. And I stopped and shocked that I even thought those thoughts. And then I realized that God was changing my heart. Not because I felt like I was better than anybody else. He changed my heart because I listened to him. God can do anything. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. There's a lot of people that struggle today with same-sex attraction who are married and have 4 kids, and he doesn't have to deliver us from anything. Am I still tempted by people? Oh, absolutely. But I choose the Lord. And that's hard to do. Even with women now, that's hard to do. But I put my faith and trust in him. I'm not perfect. I sin every day. I think thoughts that are not nice. But my hope is in Jesus. So I'll leave it there. I thank you for my time. And I will continue erasing all the old stuff and recording it. The reason in the introduction I can show my face now is because my wife and I are retired from the medical field, and I could not show my face publicly at that point. So I decided, well, now's the time. So for those of you that have heard me on Pastor Tim's channel and supported and encouraged me, you don't know how much that means to me. So thank you so much. And I've helped many people through that channel email me and talk to me. And it's not about me or elevating self, it's elevating Christ. But it really is about offering the hope of the Lord to those people who feel demonly possessed, who feel there's no hope of their changing their life. This is how I feel. This is, I can't stop feeling this way. Those kinds of people. But remember, as I said earlier, there's hope for the hopeless. And when there's life in somebody, there's hope. So hold on to that. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you so much.